I love that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good one. Good for grounding. I'm recording already.
Perfect.
Welcome to Openly Spoken, the podcast to help you show up, speak out, and be seen. On this podcast, we talk about self-love, relationships, sexuality, spirituality, and more. Hi, I am your host, Celia Antonio, and I am a relationship and sexuality coach for ambitious women with a history of toxic relationships who desire to reconnect to their sensuality and who desire to feel worthy of receiving healthy love. I celebrate you for hitting play on today's episode. I hope that you find this very supportive and helpful. And if you could show some support to the podcast by hitting subscribe on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, wherever it is that you are listening to or watching this episode, it would mean the absolute world to me. Thank you so much for being here. Now let's dive into today's episode. With it being November and the holiday season, you are probably in the throes of gatherings, and maybe there are some family gatherings up ahead in your calendar. And so that's why I wanted to talk about on this episode how to prepare yourself to deal with toxic family members for this holiday season. And I will first talk about what a toxic family member is. Then I will talk about kind of the preparation or the pre-work that you can do ahead of time that is kind of like ongoing interpersonal work you can do. And then lastly, we'll talk about an actual like game plan for the day of meeting with your family, whether it's Thanksgiving, Friendsgiving, or any other kind of holiday gathering that is coming up for you. So firstly, what is a toxic family member? A toxic family member can be hard to spot because when we grow up, however certain family members are, we tend to think that that's normal, and we don't really notice that something was not okay until we're older. So I have written some notes and written down all of the things I could possibly think of what might make a family member toxic. So what might make a family member toxic is they are someone that ignores boundaries. So if you set a boundary with them, you tell them, I don't want to talk about blank, and they keep bringing that up, they are someone who ignores boundaries. If it's someone that you have told, I'm only available for 30 minutes to talk on the phone, and they just keep on going and they don't want you to hang up, they probably ignore boundaries. And we will talk about boundaries kind of like throughout this, because I think that is the key to dealing with toxic family members, is having boundaries. And boundaries is also a deep form of self-love. And like you have to have a certain level of self-love and self-worth to be able to set boundaries. And so that's why I think dealing with toxic family members during the holidays has some pre-work and some inner work that can be ongoing for you to do. Anyways, what is a toxic family member? A toxic family member could be someone that takes up all of the room in conversation. So when you have a quote unquote conversation with them, it doesn't really feel like a conversation because they are the one talking. They are the ones taking up all the space. They're not taking time to be present with you. They're not taking the time to fully see you, to fully hear your opinion. And maybe when you do get those little moments to share something, they figure out how to take that thing that you shared and turn it back on them, or like talking about themselves, rather than actually fully seeing you and asking you how you're doing, or like deepening with whatever it is that you just shared. Toxic family member might be someone that starts fights by purposely pushing buttons, like purposely talking about topics that you have told them you do not want to talk about, or purposely doing things that they know annoy you or make you mad. They could also be someone that starts fights by pitting people against each other. A toxic family member could be someone with a substance abuse problem, because if the substance abuse problem makes them someone who's like wild and unsafe and like uncontrollable to be around. A toxic family member could be aggressive. They could also be passive aggressive. A toxic family member could be someone that is emotionally abusive or manipulative. A toxic family member could be someone that is very controlling or very hypercritical. And a toxic family member could be someone that gaslights you, someone that doesn't really truly see how you feel and gaslights you. So there might be more, but I think the telltale sign of knowing if a family member is toxic is if you feel emotionally, energetically, and physically drained after being in their presence because of the impact that they have on your mental and emotional health, or if you feel controlled, unloved, disrespected, then you might be dealing with a toxic family member. And I say might because sometimes we are in a state where we might be struggling with our mental health and our self-love. And because of that struggle, we might feel unloved, or it might feel very physically draining or emotionally draining to socialize with family. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's because those family members are toxic. And so when I give these examples, I'm really speaking from a place of you feel solid in your self-love. And I think that is the pre-work, is feeling solid in your self-work. So what to do before is to there's so much. You could do inner child work. I think inner child work is one of the most important pieces of inner work you can do when it comes to dealing with toxic family members and feeling okay for the holidays. If you want this year's holiday season to feel better than last year, starting with doing inner child work can be very powerful, very potent. And I do have a previous solo episode where I talked about how to start inner child work. And there was a meditation within that solo episode that you could follow along with. So I will link that in the caption or the show notes below. There's also worthiness work you can do. So you can do work exploring how worthy you feel and exploring turning the dial up on feeling even more worthy slowly over time. Because the more worthy you feel, the more solid and grounded and confident you will feel in setting boundaries. And setting boundaries with toxic family members is the key when it comes to, you're going to be in their presence during the holidays. So you have to have some boundaries in order to not only protect yourself, but to be able to still exist within your family unit and to not let a certain person, if a certain person shows up, if you are able to set boundaries when they are there, you're not letting that ruin your night or ruin your day or ruin your holiday because you have the solid boundaries. Okay, let's see. I think another really big piece of pre-work is to really decide and contemplate on what do you want out of the relationship with your toxic family member? What kind of relationship do you truly desire to have with them? And then from there, the hard part is to honestly answer the question of, are they even capable of that type of relationship? Are they even capable of that? And most times the answer to that is going to be no. And that's okay. You're still going to be fine. And when you come up against that, I just want to share with you that you can still give yourself what it is that you need. And in all honesty, the only person on this planet that can love you unconditionally is yourself. And so when it comes to thinking of what kind of relationship you really desire with this person and realizing that they are not capable of it, it really is it really ties in very deeply with inner child work, because your inner child can feel that sense of being soothed and getting the relationship from an adult that they always craved from you yourself, from your present day self. like having that relationship between you, your adult self right now, and your inner child can heal and soothe that longing of that deep relationship with an adult. And I think it's also about really practicing realizing that like you cannot change anybody. You can express to them how hurt they've made you feel if they even have the capacity for that. Most times that's not the case. You can express to them how you feel. You can, you can try as hard as you want to share who you are and how you feel with them. But at the end of the day, you cannot force anyone to do the work. You cannot force anyone to change their behavior. You can ask them to consider your perspective, but they might not be able to do that. You can ask them or encourage them to see a professional, to see a therapist, to see a coach. But other than that, there's nothing you can do. You cannot change them. And so I think this is a really deep invitation to really have compassion for that person, because you can see from your own relationship with them how they have you can see how they have hurt you. You can see how they are hurt because they have hurt you. And you can see how they might be suffering in their life because of the types of relationships they create because they hurt people. And then you can choose to have a lot of compassion for them because maybe you realize like, oh, this person like will never really truly know what it's like to be fully held and fully seen, because a lot of times people who are toxic, they're really just hurting, or they have really, really low self-esteem, which again goes back to hurting. And so having the compassion for them is really going to help you when you are in the presence of them, because it can kind of soften how you show up in the relationship with them. Like instead of having all this like anger and stuff, you can you can bring more love to the relationship. And really, at the end of the day, when it comes to your relationship with a toxic family member, you cannot control them, but you can control how you show up. You can control how you decide to show up. And so if you can do the own inner work yourself and with maybe a therapist or with some sort of support person, then you can get to a place where you feel less resentful and less angry because you've done your own healing on yourself. Then when you show up in, when you show up at the Thanksgiving table, if Thanksgiving is something that you celebrate, all of that resentment and anger for the past can kind of be set aside, at least from your end. And so that like takes away a layer of toxicity that's happening here in between the people. And it's not going to, fix everything, because again, this person has to do their own inner work. But it is very, very helpful in being able to show up differently and being able to show up in a way that doesn't drain you as much, because you're showing up in a way where you are choosing yourself, where you have filled your own cup instead of waiting for that person to fill your cup. Okay, let's see my notes. Okay, another piece that I wrote down that I think is very helpful as a pre-step inner work is to find a place in your body, like before you go to your gathering. Find a place in your body, within your body, that feels like it can be an anchor and that feels safe. So if I do that, if I like just to give you, I'm going to demonstrate so that you know what I'm talking about. So if I close my eyes and I feel for a part of my body that feels grounded and anchoring and safe, I feel that in my hips. So if my hips are my grounded, safe anchor space, when I'm at the table and the toxic family member says something that might trigger me, instead of responding right away, I anchor in my body and I come to that place in the hips. And that is definitely something that takes practice. Relationships are very triggering and reactions can happen in split seconds. And so I feel like I sound like a broken record with this, but mindfulness, meditation, breath work, yoga, all these practices that lengthen the time between input and reaction are going to be very helpful for you to take that pause, to drop in. And it's very important to take that pause and drop in, because you're not adding extra fuel to the fire that this person might be trying to spark. So, yeah, that's very, very helpful. And then you can also do some inner caretaker work, and father wound healing, any other caretakers, you can work with healing that stuff. And I have, in a previous episode, have talked about mother wound healing, and I'm going to include a mother wound healing guide in the caption below. It's a free guide that you can download. And I think mother wound healing is probably one of the most important things to heal when it comes to dealing with toxic family members during the holidays. Because when we have a mother wound, there's this broken sense of self-worth. There's this broken sense of being able to set boundaries, and this broken sense of feeling at home in your body. And being able to feel at home in your body and feeling the self-worth and feeling the self-love are all key pieces that you're going to need to be able to set strong boundaries when you come to your family gatherings and you know that a toxic family member is going to be there. And boundaries is, again, the key piece to all of this. So let's talk about your game day plan. It's the day of your gathering, or maybe it's the day before, and you're setting your plan for how you're going to show up. First and foremost, you need to set boundaries. You have to think about all the boundaries. So a boundary you can set is deciding when you will arrive to the event, deciding when you will leave, deciding what topics you absolutely do not want to talk about. And then maybe, to take it a step further, you can brainstorm. I mean, this is probably the overthinker part of me, but you can think about, how can I brainstorm if this topic comes up? If my uncle wants to talk about Trump and I do not want to talk about him, what is something I can say, shift the conversation in a different direction. You can also talk about, you can also set a boundary of what it is that you will share and also won't share about your life. When it comes to toxic family members, I think it's very important to safeguard some elements of your life and to not share absolutely everything that's going on with you, everything that you're feeling, and all of that, because most likely they're not able to really meet you and hold you in all that. And I don't want you to be in a position where you're fully opening yourself to somebody who's not able to meet you, because that's going to feel very shitty. It's going to feel very shitty to receive. And so for the sake of your own self-love, you need to have boundaries of what it is you do want to share about your life, about your thoughts, your emotions, what it is that's going on with you right now. But not in a way where you are showing up to this family gathering with a persona. You can still be yourself. And in fact, I think being your authentic self is the key to maybe shifting toxic family dynamics, because sometimes toxic family dynamics, carry on for so long because everyone is ignoring certain things and no one has the courage to speak up. But if you have the courage to speak up and say hey, this thing, I don't like this, or this is what I think about that, or I don't want to do that, you are changing how the person is going to treat you, because you're setting a boundary. Boundaries are you teaching other people how to treat you. Yeah, so you're going to set boundaries with what you will share and what you won't share. And you're not going to do it from a place of coming in with a fake persona. And so when things come up that you don't want to share, you can just simply state that. Like, I don't want to share that right now. Like, I just don't wish to talk about that. And if anyone's going to get mad at you for that, like, that's on them. It honestly has nothing to do with you. So just know that, like, you deserve and you are worthy of having those boundaries. Okay. Let's see. What else did I want to say? You can also, so with your game day plan, first and foremost, we're setting our boundaries. Second is bringing in the intention of having zero expectation. And from that place of zero expectation, simply just being present, just like bringing in the energy of, I'm just going to show up and observe what's happening. And as I was researching for this episode, I saw an article online that said, master the art of being quiet. And so that goes back into what you like, having the boundary of like not sharing every little thing. If you can also master the art of being quiet, and when everyone's talking at the table, like you don't really have to include any more fuel to that fire if there's an argument going on. You can also decide, if there's a fight happening, I'm not going to say it. Like, I'm choosing not to participate in that. Like, I'm not here for that today. You can choose to keep the conversation like light and casual. And that's all I have to say with that. When you do speak up for yourself, though, and you do come to a situation where maybe a fight has broken out and you feel the need to speak up for yourself, I think it's really important to express yourself in a way that isn't like, you are doing blank. I think it's much better to make the statements be I statements. Like, I feel, or believe, or I don't like this situation, or I feel uncomfortable. Like, when you make it an I statement, then the other person does not feel like they are being accused of something. And then when they don't feel like they're being accused of something, then they're not going in that like defensive mode that a lot of toxic people like to be in. Like, they're constantly like defending themselves. So that's another key piece, is to have the statements, the I statements. Okay, so game day plan, we're setting the boundaries, we're having no expectations, we're being present, we're mastering the art of being quiet. We are keeping in mind to use I statements if we do have to speak up for ourselves. And then two more things. One is, I would suggest to completely avoid consuming alcohol or any substances for two reasons. One, so that you can be in this clear state of mind, so that you can be more in control of what it is that you say and all the things. Also, I think it's very healthy to be able to learn how to show up in uncomfortable situations while you are sober. It is possible. I promise you. And two, the second reason is so that you can be your own transportation and drive yourself home if you need to. I really think you should, if you're going to a gathering where you know there's going to be family members that are toxic, you really need to have an exit strategy. You really need to be like, I think you should drive yourself there. You should drive yourself back. And you should have a plan of, if blank happens, I'm going to leave. And then lastly, is having a support person that you can vent to. So you can ask a trusted friend if they are willing to be a person that can hear you and can vent, and that you can vent to. Maybe they also have toxic family members and they are also feeling anxious about the upcoming holidays. And maybe the both of you can be support for each other. And so that can be very helpful to do. You can also choose to have your support person be your significant other. It can be a therapist. It could be a counselor. It could be a mental health provider. Anyone that you trust And I would suggest to set that up ahead of time. Like, let them know, like, hey, I'm just, planning for this holiday gathering. There's going to be certain family members there that, usually trigger me. It would be very helpful for me if I had someone to vent to afterwards. Would you like to be that person? Like, are you available to be that person? Do you have the capacity to do that? And yeah, that's very helpful. So let me just check my notes. Yeah, that's about it. So that is all I have to say on that very quick episode. I will say, if you are listening to this and you're going straight into overthinking every little detail and like wanting to write out your whole plan, I want to remind you that you need to be coming into this with zero expectation, because you really cannot control the whole day. All you can really do is decide how you will react to any situation. You can decide when you will arrive, when you will leave, all the boundaries. Like, the boundaries is the main piece. And then what will help you set strong boundaries is all the other things we talked about. Doing your own inner work for self-love, doing your own inner child work, the mother wound healing, father wound healing, all of those things are really going to help you with the boundaries. So I know that inner work stuff is really like ongoing, and it can be like an onion, has many layers. So don't let that be intimidating. I would still, encourage you to go into that now and stay consistent with it, and just watch every year during the holidays. It's going to be easier and easier for you to set boundaries. And that really is the main key piece. Like, if I could narrow down this podcast episode into one sentence, it would be: the way you deal with toxic family members during the holidays is by being able to set healthy boundaries. That is all. Thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate you leaving Openly Spoken a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. And thank you so much. I will see you next time.